Welcome back to the Fat Guys and Friends podcast, episode 8, here, recording on Monday, July 11th. I am Colton Bartholomew, your co-host, with our other co-host, Mr. Wang. How are you, sir?
Hi.
We're sorry we took a little bit of a break there. Had some 4th of July fun. Actually got to see each other last weekend, so that was good. But we're back.
Remember when we planned on doing a podcast in person and then we were too hungover?
Yep, sure do. Remember that very vividly. It was very painful.
Yeah, we don't plan very well.
But back to here to talk some sports. Had some big events go on over the weekend and just today. We're going to start today's podcast kind of recapping and talking about some of the big news out of the UFC. Obviously, this weekend's UFC 200 card and the other two cards that they had went well. A couple of titles changed hands, and the big news coming late last night that the UFC was officially sold to a group led by the talent agency WME/IMG for about $4 billion.
Surprisingly, our offer wasn't accepted.
What was that? I'm sorry?
Surprisingly, our offer wasn't accepted.
Yeah, we offered $15 and a pack of Marlboro cigarettes because Dana White likes to smoke, so they got shut down.
We did what we could on short notice.
Exactly. But $4 billion for the UFC, and we do take into consideration the fact that the Fertitta brothers bought the UFC with Dana White for $2 million back in 2000. You're talking about 4,000% increase in value in 16 years. Pretty incredible just how the UFC has grown, and they had a pretty interesting video package kind of displaying that during the UFC 200 card. And Wayne, I want to ask you, because I know you watched it, we were texting here and there throughout the card. I mean, when you build up a fight that it's a seminal moment for your company and everything's supposed to be big and grand, what'd you think overall of UFC 200?
I thought the opening video package was awesome because they showed everything from UFC 1 to the 8-man tournament that they had at the original UFC in Denver, all the way up to the Brock Lesnar, Mark Hunt stuff and the title fights that they had at UFC 200, and just every big moment that they had in between. It was really cool to see, and I thought UFC 200 lived up to the hype. I mean, it would have been better if John Jones was there to fight Daniel Cormier instead of Anderson Silva. But Anderson Silva more than deserved to be on the card for being one of the greatest UFC fighters of all time. So I thought it lived up to the hype pretty well.
Yeah, definitely. And you bring up Anderson Silva. He kind of emerged as the shining light of the card. I mean, obviously, fighting on 48 hours notice.
Insane.
Absolutely. And against the light heavyweight champion of the world, light heavyweight division he's only fought in 3 times in the UFC. Aside from not being able to keep Cormier off of him, which isn't too surprising since Cormier is an Olympic wrestler, that for 48 hours, that's about as good as you can do. He landed some big shots, and he had Cormier rocked late in the 3rd round. I mean, one more shot goes his way. Who knows? We're talking about one of the biggest upsets ever, but Cormier was able to take care of business and kind of laid on him, but
he more than laid on him. All he did was lay on top of him the entire fight.
Yeah,
even after the fight, Cormier said he did what he had to do, which was 100% right.
Mm-hmm.
Can you imagine how bad we would shit on Cormier if Anderson Silva gets to fight 48 hours before and beats Cormier?
Oh, exactly. That's why he had to.
You look.
He knew that he had the advantage on the ground.
Yeah.
I mean, Silva tried for a couple of triangle chokes, a couple of arm bars, but yeah, I mean, Cormier being the former Olympic wrestler, he's just going to hold him down and keep him there. And when you do that for long enough, you're going to win your UFC fight. But, that was the third fight on the main card. A couple other big ones. We'll jump right to our boy, Brock Lesnar.
Oh.
Coming back after 5 years out of the UFC and taking down Mark Hunt. Kind of a similar fight that DC and Anderson Silva had. Lesnar from the jump very clearly wanted nothing to do with punching with Mark Hunt.
Can't blame him.
Yep, smart call. I mean, kind of that same situation. There's only so much pride you can have before just instincts and intelligence take over. And Brock Lesnar's very aware that if he stands and trades with Mark Hunt, he's going to lose. But if he tries to wrestle him and gets him to the ground, he's going to win. And that's what he did, earning a 3-round decision, which I thought was interesting. His first 3-round decision since his second UFC fight ever against Heath Herring.
I was shocked that it went 3 rounds. I thought either Hunt would rock him in the first round and Lesnar would go down and be done, or Brock would be able to get him to the ground in the first round and punch his face in, which he almost did in the 3rd round. I thought they were going to stop it in the 3rd round there for a little bit, but
yeah, there was an argument to be made, but I mean Hunt was still keeping his arms active and keeping Lesnar off him a little bit, but yeah, I think the Vegas odds were something like 12-1 that fight wasn't going to go all 3 rounds, so they cleaned up there. And Brock, who was actually an underdog, somewhere in the 4.5 to 5 to 1 underdog range for most of the week, but then ended up getting closer to even, ended up winning the fight. So, I mean, we talked a little bit about it. Brock Lesnar kind of just doing what he knows he can do, which is being a wrestler. And when you're talking about a guy that massive, and he's laying on top of you and keeping your legs and feet in control, there wasn't a whole lot Mark Hunt could do.
No, not at all. I know Brock has to be happy with the win, and he has to be happy with the $2.5 million payday he got out of it. But I think almost happier than Brock Lesnar has to be Vince McMahon that he didn't lose that fight.
Oh, man. I can't imagine the size of relief that came out of Stamford, Connecticut watching that fight. I mean, just oh my God, we can do everything we wanted to now.
Yeah.
And hell, I mean, they can even do it more. Mark Hunt was the number 8 ranked heavyweight in the world. Brock came off a 5-year layover, and yeah, he didn't, knock him out or anything or stop him, but he won the fight. There wasn't a question about it.
All he had to do was win the fight.
Yep.
So my question for you is, do you think we'll see Lesnar fight again in the UFC?
Definitely. I don't think
he has to after this.
I don't think there's a way that he can turn down. Let's just look at it from a money perspective, because we know that's what Brock is about. He's essentially a combat sports mercenary. He will go wherever the money is. He trained for 6 weeks. He claims he probably trained for more than that, but he claimed for 6 weeks to work one night, do 1 week of media, and he made a guaranteed $2.5 million, but he also gets money off the back end. He gets about a percentage point of the revenue from the pay-per-view. So the amount of money that he's going to end up making,
probably made close to $3 million.
Oh, easily. They haven't released the numbers yet because it takes a little while to tabulate them all, but early reports are UFC 200 did not break the UFC 100 pay-per-view buy record, but it came pretty close. It was in that 1.3, 1.4 million range.
You have to assume if John Jones would have been on the card, they would have broke the record.
Yeah, the controversy leading up, I think, made some people be like, oh, well, let's just go out and watch this fight instead of, okay, let's buy it at home. But they did the best they could. I mean, you have to give the UFC credit. Obviously, when John Jones pops for performance-enhancing drug use, and then later gets the B sample back, and that's also positive. I mean, to replace John Jones, who's a legend in his own right, with Anderson Silva, like you said, one of the greatest fighters ever. I mean, that's about as even as a trade for marketability as you can get.
Oh, for sure.
And jumping back to the Brock Lesnar fight, it was just really funny to watch that second round. How far away Brock was standing from Mark Hunt. At a certain point, Hunt was just standing in the middle of the ring while Lesnar circled, almost at the octagon drawing where they have to stand outside to start the ring or start the rounds. Give the man credit. He knows what his strengths are, but it was just hilarious to see a guy who, has a lot of bravado and says a lot about he can do whatever he wants, staying as far away as he could from Mark Hunt.
I even tweeted this out. I think Brock Lesnar is the only person in UFC history to get cheered when he gets a takedown. Because really, everybody wants to watch everybody else stand and throw strikes and just have glorified boxing. But when Lesnar goes to the ground, people get excited.
Yeah, and I think it's because once he gets on the ground, that's when he starts to, kind of go into that that beast mode.
But he starts to fight.
Yeah, you're right.
He doesn't do anything on his feet.
No, I mean he can punch a little bit, but yeah, he doesn't have the technique. And it was interesting to see just from a fight breakdown standpoint. Early in the first round, he was moving his feet really well. He was switching stances. He was doing a lot of things that we hadn't seen Brock Lesnar do before, and it might have been a factor in the fact that he didn't get to train, or he didn't train for a lot of time, or just maybe not feeling as comfortable as early in the fight. Later on, he started getting a little more flat-footed and really was going for the takedown or bust. But, getting back to what we talked about, there's too much money for Brock Lesnar to not try to fight again. I mean, he can do it with his WWE schedule, which is a glorified part-time.
Mm-hmm. But really, his fate is in Vince McMahon's hands because he's under contract with WWE. So Vince has to grant him access to the UFC, just like he did for 200. So really, it's all up to Vince McMahon if he fights again.
This is true. I mean, there's also the potential that maybe Brock just asks for a release from his contract and stops wrestling, but then, again, being the money man that he is,
back to the money,
that's a lot of money to leave on the table to do very little work.
From the WWE, he's not going to just walk away from all that money.
Jumping back, or to talk about something that you and I both love, obviously, the fact that UFC 200 basically had to stop for 2 to 3 minutes and do a SummerSlam promo before Lesnar's fight.
UFC fans had to be so goddamn mad.
Oh, I can't imagine how red his bald face got. Just as the time is being taken away off the UFC pay-per-view, which already went too long. That was over 3 hours.
Oh, yeah.
And they can't control that, but man, that was tough even for a big fan like me to watch. But
not only did they have the SummerSlam promo, they had the WWE 2K17 commercial play with Brock on the cover.
Oh yeah, with Brock Lesnar on the cover. So great. I mean, there's been a lot of talk, and even on this podcast we talked about what you think there was some type of trade made for Lesnar's appearance at 200, and obviously this was part of it.
We got a little bit of an answer Saturday night.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the UFC basically pretends wrestling doesn't exist outside of signing Lesnar or CM Punk, and to have them do a 2-minute commercial for SummerSlam, just rich.
Just going back to Brock Lesnar a little bit, do you think this affects his WWE status? How do you think he gets booked in the future because of this win?
Oh man, I mean, you're talking about a guy who clearly is the most quote unquote unstoppable guy in WWE, who already gets billed as unbeatable. Really hasn't lost clean since probably his 2012 return.
Yeah, since he lost to Cena, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, so that's going to continue, and it's hard for me to now look at this Randy Orton fight at SummerSlam as anything more than just, let's get Brock on to sell pay-per-views, because, I mean, you're not going to have Brock Lesnar go win in the UFC and then lose at SummerSlam to Randy Orton.
Exactly.
Unless there's some type of outside interference.
Yeah, I was talking to my brother about this. I feel like the way Brock won his UFC fight almost hurts the WWE in a way, because you can't have him lose for the foreseeable future at all. You can't even have him have close to a match, because you can't have Brock win a real fight and then come into WWE and lose a fake fight, because that makes zero sense.
Yeah, and I mean, like I said, unless there's a stipulation or there's outside interference, there's not a way they can book it to be believable. And it's funny that we're talking about believability. Brock Lesnar is the only guy that we care about believability, because we've seen him compete in combat sports outside of WWE.
Exactly.
I mean, you can't. I mean, every day, Big Show probably hasn't won in 15 years.
Yeah.
Or in 15 months in WWE, but I mean, and that guy is 7 foot and 500 pounds. But it's wrestling, so it's believable when he loses to the small guy, because it's like, oh yeah, he's a wrestler.
Or if you go back to WrestleMania 30, we were all mad that Brock Lesnar beat this mythical man with superpowers. That being the.
I'm still mad. Don't act like that's past. I'm upset.
If anybody was going to beat the streak, it should have been Brock. They did it right.
We could argue that another time.
Fair.
But getting back to UFC 200 here, the women's title fight, the main event, Amanda Nunes and Miesha Tate. Nunes blasts Tate with her right hand a couple minutes into the fight, and Tate was just out of her sorts and gets punched a few more times, and then Nunes takes her to the ground and locks in a choke. Not a good look for the UFC women's bantamweight division. Last 4 fights, the title has changed hands, and any promoter knows that's not what you want.
Yeah, you want a little bit of parity, but not that much.
Yeah, I mean, Amanda Nunes, very good fighter. It's not disparaging of her. She won the fight. That's her job. But, I mean, I always thought Miesha Tate being the champion was just a little bit of lucky circumstances. She weathered the early storm in her Holly Holm fight and then was able to lock in that choke in the 5th round, mostly because Holly is very inexperienced on the ground. But just, even though it was a finish to end the night, not super exciting because Miesha really wasn't competitive after about a minute and a half.
I'm going to be honest, I was so excited after watching Lesnar win, I didn't watch the main event. I was tired and went to bed, so that's on me for not being a true UFC fan, but I got to watch Brock win, so.
There you go. And then another title getting awarded, the interim featherweight belt, goes to Jose Aldo after he avoided Frankie Edwards for 5 rounds and
ran away from
landed
him.
a couple of big shots. God, Jose Aldo, for all the skills that he claims to have, that guy is Floyd Mayweather of the UFC.
100%.
I mean, congrats, man. You backed up, circled away, and then tagged when you could counter. I mean, to me, that's not fighting. That's winning.
Yeah, that's
there's a
fighting
big
to
difference.
An extent, but there comes a point where you just need to lock arms and do something.
Yeah, I mean, you heard the crowd kind of turn during that fight. I mean, the undercard had all decisions, which had some boring moments, to be honest. And then the main card starts with Cain Velasquez finishing Travis Brown, so, starts hot. And then Jose Aldo comes out there with Frankie Edgar, and Edgar's pushing the pace like he always does, but Aldo's just running away. And it was about the 3rd round, and Aldo really started taking control, and he cut Frankie over his eye, and then he just was in and out, not fighting, just kind of tagging him and running around. Mm-hmm. The crowd just started getting really antsy, and that's when they started booing. And then it even got louder during the Cormier-Anderson fight when they were on the ground most of the time and not doing too much.
They even chanted, "Stand them up" in the Cormier fight, which was awesome.
Yeah, and honestly, I think it worked on one time. I think in the 3rd round, that it was an early stand-up for a usual UFC fight.
But going back to the Aldo-Edgar fight, my favorite part of that fight was after the fight was over, when Aldo won the fight, immediately looked at Conor McGregor and asked for a rematch.
I'm going to tell you right now, he doesn't want that fight.
He looked like he did. I know he doesn't in real life.
He can claim that, but he's talking trash now because it's pretty much the worst secret in the UFC that Conor McGregor is never going to get back down to 145. Yeah. I mean, Conor McGregor is 5'11", almost 6 feet tall. He's a giant in that division, and for him to cut down to 145, he has to emaciate himself, and it is tough. And as you're getting older, I mean, he's still young for fighting, but he's getting just, as you progress and your career develops, the harder your weight cut is, the worse your performance gets. And for a guy like that to have to continually drop down that far in weight, it's just not going to go well eventually, and I think he wants to avoid that.
Yeah, he just looks weird when he cuts down to 145. He looks, I don't want to say he doesn't look healthy because he's probably in the best shape of any of the UFC fighters, but he looks weird at 145.
Yeah, I mean, he's skin and bone and muscle.
Yeah.
I mean, he's nothing else, and his face is just not, I know the pictures and the look you're talking about. And a great example of this is a guy like Johnny Hendricks. Johnny Hendricks fought on the undercard, and he actually missed weight and it was clear that his weight cut went really poorly, and it affected his performance to 10,000 degrees, man. I mean, he was terrible against Kelvin Gastelum, and credit to Gastelum, he tagged him and was doing everything he could to finish the fight. Johnny Hendricks just has an iron chin and wasn't going to go down, but he looked terrible, and Conor McGregor sees that, and other guys that continually drop down to weights that are a little further from their natural weight than they really probably should be, and he doesn't want that. He's smart enough to know there are big money fights in the lightweight division and maybe even welterweight where he's going to fight Diaz again, that he doesn't need to drop down all that weight.
Can we just agree that Nate Diaz sounds like a drunk guy in a bar trying to start fights with everybody else? That interview with Joe Rogan was just dumb.
That's an insult to drunk guys at bars trying to start fights.
Seriously, he's
Diaz,
so unintelligent, it hurts.
I cannot. They might be, both the Diaz brothers, might be my least favorite people in the UFC because, by God, like you just said, so dumb. And that was one of my favorite pictures that came out of the night that I saw on Reddit, was Joe Rogan staring back at the camera with his eyes wide open like, wow,
this guy
that was
really?
indiscernible. Yeah. Did anybody catch that? Because I didn't.
And he sounds drunk. That's why I say he sounds like a drunk guy in a bar, because he just slurs every word together. And it's just bad. He shouldn't be allowed to talk into a microphone.
I am in total agreement with you. Speaking of awkward interview moments, let's talk back to our boy Brock Lesnar.
Oh, God.
Who wins the fight.
This.
Oh, my. So, he wins the fight. Joe Rogan comes in there, starts talking to him. And like Brock usually does, doesn't really answer the question, just kind of starts talking whatever he wants to talk about.
But then he said something that scared us.
Yes. So Brock gets asked, basically just, how to feel to win. He's just like, hey, this is for all the servicemen and women and the and the officers and all this stuff. And everyone's like, oh, yeah, hooray,
right.
police. Like, yeah, all right, good job, Brock. And then he's like, from one white boy, and then he just pauses.
Oh, God. Oh, God.
And I can tell you, the whole room that I was in, all my closest friends are all huge Lesnar fans, are just holding their breaths like, no, don't do this, don't screw this up. And then he just drops, to all nationalities, I can tell you there was an audible gasp, let out of air. Oh, okay, we're good. He's not going to screw this up.
Luckily, the N-word he chose was nationalities.
Exactly. And I can tell you right now, you see Joe Rogan's face when he says one white boy, and he's like, oh, God. He's staring up at Brock like, oh, here we go. It's over.
Good thing we're on pay-per-view.
Exactly. Oh, man. But then he, kind of re-upped it in the post-fight interviews, talking about just doesn't like that it's so divided, and it's like, we live in America. And it's like, all right, Brock, thanks, man.
Yeah, it was surprisingly kind of intelligent about his comments when I thought he was just going to shit on black people.
Yeah. I mean, let's be real. It was not that far from the possibility that he does that.
Yeah, because everybody remembers, in I think 2004 it was, when he was still in WWE, and blatantly said in an interview, I don't like gay people.
And he wasn't even really prompted to say it.
Not at all.
He wasn't really asked about gay rights, because that's not exactly the interviews you do with WWE wrestlers.
No, not by any means.
Oh, man. But all in all, great weekend for the UFC. Obviously, Eddie Alvarez wins the lightweight title on Thursday night, and then Joanna Jędrzejczyk retains her strawweight title on Friday night. Really just some good fights all around, and culminating in 200. Maybe didn't live up to all the hype about having these amazing fights, but just stylistically, that's kind of how some of those are going to play out. Like, you knew Aldo was going to run away from Frankie, and you knew if Brock was going to win, he was going to have to lay on Hunt, and same with DC and Anderson.
Exactly, but overall, I thought it would, we've said before, John Jones would have made the card much better, but the other two big fights lived up to their hype, and Cain Velasquez coming back and beating Travis Brown lived up to the hype. So I think overall it was a good weekend.
Yeah, definitely. And we'll have to see. There's a strong possibility of Cain Velasquez Brock Lesnar rematch, possibly in December if Brock comes back. If Cain doesn't, assert himself right in that heavyweight title picture.
I would like to
but
see that.
I'd like to see it too. I'd like to see a healthy Lesnar against him because obviously Cain's a better striker, but their wrestling is equal, if not Lesnar, I think would probably be better if he's healthy.
I agree.
But that'll be one for another time. Let's move on to one topic that, obviously to dominate a lot of headlines that we weren't able to get to. NBA free agency.
Yeah.
Lots of big things happened. Obviously the big highlights being Kevin Durant heading up to Golden State. Combining potentially four of the best 10, 15 players in the league on one team. Have to see how it works out and if all these new bench guys the Warriors are going to have because they cleared out that cap space, they can keep that depth they had. But
I really hope that you saw the picture that Kevin Durant signed his contract the same day that the NWO was formed, and they compared that.
Oh, sure did.
That was one of the best things I saw on the internet over the weekend.
Definitely. And some other NBA news, obviously, Draymond Green apparently just got arrested on Sunday for an assault. So, we'll have to see what happens there.
Well, he didn't get arrested on the court at all, so he's finally getting arrested off the court.
Fair. But I got to tell you, I feel like Draymond Green's on a path to be this generation's Charles Barkley. I mean,
Besides already winning a title, yeah.
Yeah, aside from already winning a title. But I mean, an undersized guy who plays forward/center.
Says a lot of dumb stuff.
Has no problem speaking his mind, and clearly takes no crap from fans or whoever else that he punched.
Did they say who he punched, or did any other details come
out?
out?
No, not yet. I haven't seen enough on it yet.
I hope it was a fan.
I've got to imagine somebody was talking a bunch of trash to him.
I hope it was a Cavs fan.
Hey, it very well could be.
It's true.
But, we're going to assume if you care about sports, you've heard enough about the big-time free agents that signed. So what Wang and I decided was we're going to go a little bit under the radar here, and we're going to give you, 5 to 10 guys that sign contracts in free agency. They're going to have a big impact on their teams that might not have gotten the publicity that obviously a move like Durant or Dwayne Wade coming to Chicago did.
Yes. So,
Wang, why don't you start with your number 5 selection of under the radar free agency picks?
My number 5 under the radar NBA signing was Bradley Beal staying with the Wizards.
Ooh, okay.
Not a lot of people were talking about it because he's staying in the place that he originally was, which is kind of boring.
True. I mean, on the radar only in the sense that it was such a big money contract, but you're right. I mean, kind of stayed quiet.
But between him and John Wall, they're one of the better guard combinations, not in just the East, I would say in the NBA. And because they play in the East, they have a better chance of making the playoffs, even though they didn't this year. But I do think they did overpay a bit for him, giving him a 5-year, $128 million contract. But if you want to keep your guys, you got to pay them. Plus, shooting guard isn't a very deep position in the NBA right now, so I would argue that Bradley Beal is one of the better shooting guards in the NBA.
Yeah, no, I'm with you there. And obviously, his main skill is shooting the three, and
yep.
when he's on the court, he can hit threes with just about anybody. That the big caveat there is being on the court,
yeah.
And that was the thing that made me question why they wanted to tie up so much money into a guy like that, just because he hasn't played enough games, in my opinion, consistently to garner that type of contract.
Very fair.
But, I'll drop my number 5 on you. Al Jefferson, a 3-year, $30 million deal to sign with the Pacers.
Get paid, big man.
Get paid. Obviously, all about big men getting paid. But, if you're in the East, you know that the East runs through LeBron James.
Yep.
And if you're going to beat LeBron James, it's been proven over and over, you have to have rim protection.
100%.
And the Pacers have a guy in Paul George that can do a good job defending LeBron on the perimeter. But Al Jefferson gives them an inside presence that they had a couple of years ago with Roy Hibbert.
Exactly.
And Roy Hibbert was so limited offensively that he was really only out there for defense. But Al Jefferson is one of the better low post scorers in the game right now. And if he can stay healthy, which has been a concern for him, and it's probably why his deal was only for $30 million. But if he can stay out there and his feet stay healthy for him, he's going to be very difficult to contend with. And I honestly think he could be putting up, 15, 12 a night for Indiana.
I agree. I don't think he's as good as a defender as Roy Hibbert was, as you mentioned, but he's so much better on offense, and he gives you the decent rim protection that you need in the East. So I think it's a good signing for the Pacers.
What's your number 4?
4, I went with not a very big name. I went with Ish Smith, signing a 3-year deal with the Pistons. I know he played for the train wreck that was the 76ers last year, but if you look at his stats, he actually had a nice season towards the end. And going to the Pistons gives him a quality backup to point guard Reggie Jackson. And Smith is somebody who's capable of running an offense and getting points when he needs to. And again, going back to playing in the East, you're always able to make the playoffs because it's so bad. And depth is key for a playoff run. So I think it's a good signing by the Pistons.
And another thing, with the way that the NBA wants to limit guys' minutes until the playoffs and wants to be able to have kind of deeper benches in the regular season, you got to have a guy that can create his own shot off the bench. And Ish Smith can definitely do that. He's a smaller guy, but he's so fast and so good off the dribble that he can get to the basket. And he's been a proven NBA player, even in his primarily backup role for a long time. So yeah, I agree with you. That could be a nice addition. He's never going to be the main piece on a team, but he's going to be a guy that's going to help win games and win quarters for you.
And I like that he goes by Ish.
I like Ish too. It's different. But my 4 is Mirza Teletovic.
That's fun to say.
Yeah, it is. For the Milwaukee Bucks. Also signs a 3-year, $30 million deal. This got buried under the radar a little bit just because it was so early in free agency. I think it was on the first day that he signed with the Bucks. But this guy is really what the Bucks needed last year, and they're adding the pieces that they need to contend with that young core that they have. Milwaukee was just god-awful at three-point shooting last year, and Teletovic is a very reliable three-point shooter, and positionally he's a decent defender, especially if another team's playing a stretch 4 like he plays. He can guard those guys all day. The second half of last year, he and Devin Booker really tore it up in Phoenix. And there are a lot of games that they played with, high 120s to high 110s, but, he's able to score and he can rebound a little bit when he tries. So I definitely think the Bucks added a huge need for their roster.
Definitely. Like you said, he can shoot the 3 and he fits in with their size because the Bucks are signing everybody that's huge, so he fits in with the size perfectly with them.
They're very true. He's a 6'10" guy that's got like a 7-foot wingspan and has familiarity with Jason Kidd, which obviously is going to help. He's going to be able to fit in a little more seamlessly than maybe other guys that have never played with that coach before. So hopefully Milwaukee gets out of the gutter, man. I want them to be good. I want a team that fought to stay in their city at least a little bit, and then seems to be making good moves in the draft and other things to be good.
Exactly. For
number 3, Wayne.
My number 3, I went with a bigger name than Ish Smith. I went with Joe Johnson going to the Jazz.
Ooh, okay, yeah. I kind of forgot about him.
It just recently happened. The Jazz are one of the up-and-coming teams in the Western Conference. People forget that they were a game away from making the playoffs last year and played the Warriors extremely tough in their meetings last season and could have very well given them a tough playoff series. But instead, we got James Harden and the shit-tastic Rockets making the 8th seed. And the
Jazz didn't want to be there?
Yeah, and then the Jazz just decided to play zero defense against Kobe in his last game and let him score 60 points.
That was awesome. Don't hate it.
It was awesome. I'm not hating it. But one thing the Jazz are really lacking is veteran leadership. And sure, Joe Johnson isn't the player he once was, and he definitely didn't live up to his 6-year, $119 million contract from the Hawks. But he's been around the NBA long enough to provide exactly what the Jazz need, which is just a veteran presence in the locker room.
Definitely, and you mentioned they're kind of on that up and coming team, and he's not going to be what he was at his best in Atlanta. A top tier wing scorer, but he can score. I mean, he'll give you 15 to 18 points and
still put the ball in the bucket.
And he gets a bad rap for defense because when he was at his athletic best, he wasn't a very good effort defender. But he's gotten better as he's gotten older, and I think they'll be smart and not expect him to lock down the top wing guys, but at least slow him down a little.
Exactly. They know what they're getting with Joe Johnson, and they're not going to ask for more.
Yeah, and I think they got him at a decent price for today's market, especially for how much he's made before.
Definitely.
My number 3, a guy that a lot of people know, especially if they watch basketball, but I think it's more under the radar because of how important I think it is to the team, and that's Jordan Crawford remaining with the Clippers for 3 years and $42 million.
That's fair.
Once Blake got hurt last year by punching the team's trainer, which is still funny, but and then JJ Redick had missed some time last year as well. He helped carry the team with Chris Paul and DeAndre. He was their other scoring option outside of those guys, and he's a former sixth man of the year. Adds a dynamic scorer off the bench, like we talked about. You've got to have a guy that can create his own shot, and that's what he is. He's a heat check guy off the bench, and he can do so much for you. And in all honesty, the Clippers have to be looking at their core right now of CP3, Blake Griffin, DeAndre. This has got to be the last year. They've never made it out of the second round. And they're going to keep trying to contend with the Warriors and the Spurs and the other top teams in the West. I mean, you're going to have to change something.
Yeah,
so if this is the last year for them, Crawford's going to be big.
Yeah, they don't do anything this year. They've got to make some changes. Especially with CP3 and Blake both beating up after this year.
Yeah, and, we talked about the wings in the West and just wing players in general. Outside of Crawford, they have no one on the wing that is worth a damn.
No.
So, I mean, he's got to be their wing guy, and I wouldn't be shocked this year if we see him play a little bit more in the starting lineup with him, Redick, and Paul as a 1, 2, and 3, and then have Blake and DeAndre really funnel everything defensively toward them.
Yeah, they've got to do something to shake it up because, like you said, they've never made it out of the second round. They're always a good team in the regular season, and then the playoffs come, and the old Chris Paul thing comes up where you can't win in the playoffs for whatever reason, not able to.
All right, what was your number 2?
For number 2, I went with a pretty big signing, but I don't think it's getting the attention that it deserves. I went Pau Gasol going to the Spurs.
Oh, okay. Yeah, especially with the news today.
Especially with Tim Duncan retiring today, I think it becomes even more important. But if you think about the style of play between Pau and Duncan, I think they're very similar. They can both step out and hit the mid-range jumper. They both can score inside when they need to. They both play pretty good defense, and I would argue that Pau even plays a little better defense than Duncan. And I know...
Yeah, at this point in their careers, I agree with you.
And I know that Pau isn't young in his own rights, but I think it's a great move for the Spurs that needs more attention, because especially with Duncan retiring today.
Yeah, and when you have a guy like LaMarcus Aldridge who can dominate on the block or on the high post, you have to have, if you're going to have a 2 big man lineup, your other big man has to be able to step away from the basket and give him room. And Pau obviously can do that.
Space.
And yeah, definitely. And if they're going to go maybe a smaller lineup when they want to have either LaMarcus or Pau play center, Pau has definitely proven with the Lakers and with the Bulls that he can do that when you have a smaller lineup out there. And he's actually developed like a little bit of a corner 3. I mean, sure. It's not great, but it's something that a defender has to account for. And if he leaves him wide open, he's going to make it. So I agree with you. Yeah, kind of a bigger name, but you're right. I mean, classic Spurs, something they did went under the radar.
Yeah, what do you know?
But my number 2, under the radar, I would say because of the other moves that this team made. But Courtney Lee signing with the Knicks.
Yeah.
He got a little bit too much money, in my opinion. He got 4 years and $48 million. And, if this doesn't work out very well, that 4-year contract's really going to start hurting. But with D Rose as your point guard, You need a guy who can shoot in your backcourt. And Courtney Lee can do that, and he's one of the better two-guard defenders in the basketball league.
I agree.
You know, like he can't. You know, he's not a guy that's gonna lock down LeBron a three spot, but anyone else, he can guard those 1 and 2 just as well as anybody. I think there's a lot more value in him than a lot of the other two guards that got a lot more money. If you're gonna offer me Bradley Beal or Courtney Lee, I would probably take a gamble with Courtney Lee first because at least he's gonna play.
He's more proven. That's fair.
Yeah, and if the Knicks do what they claim they're gonna do, which is turn it around here and get into that second tier of the playoffs, I think Courtney Lee's gonna be a big reason why.
I would argue that the Knicks might be the most interesting team in the NBA next season, just because of all the moves they made, and I just want to see how they mesh together.
Yeah, I mean, the one person you don't have to worry about with meshing is Joakim Noah, because he doesn't demand the ball at all. He's he is the ultimate glue guy, and then he's all effort and hustle and defense. And if he gets the ball on offense, he's either looking to pass or he just got off a rebound and he's looking to put it back up.
Exactly.
But
it's just a matter of him staying healthy.
Staying healthy and figuring out the ball distribution between D Rose and Carmelo. I mean, they're both guys that create off the dribble, and Melo is a decent shooter, but he's not a spot up guy that's just gonna knock him down every time. He needs to be able to create his own shot. And Derrick Rose, who knows what you're gonna get from him.
And they need to figure out where Kristaps fits into all that, because he's an offensive player too.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. Kristaps definitely has to get the ball a good amount if they're going to be anything. So you're right. I mean, for the sake of how does this chemistry experiment work? Maybe it blows up by late December and it's all over, or somehow it comes together and Carmelo, looks like a real team player for once.
Who knows?
Yeah. All right. So what was your number one?
Number one, it was a decently big signing, but I think it's gone under the radar. But I think it's so good just because of the fit. I went Delly going to the Bucks.
Woo, Delly!
Delly! The Bucks finally get what they want. Matthew Dellavedova is just a shittier Jason Kidd, in my opinion. So who better than Jason Kidd to mold somebody into Jason Kidd than Jason Kidd? Now the Bucks can run this stupid lineup of having Giannis play the point guard on offense, and they got a good point guard defender on defense in Delly. And it's a crazy idea, but Jason Kidd wants to do it, and I say go for it, and Delly allows them to do it.
Yeah, I mean, Delly definitely is a guy that will play a lot better perimeter defense than Michael Carter-Williams has shown the ability to. Yes. And even though Giannis is going to play point guard on offense, he's still going to be guarding 2s and 3s and possibly even stretch 4s on defense.
Cannot defend the point.
Yeah, he's not going to be able to defend the point.
Enough.
Yeah. He can help on switches, but he's not going to be able to do it consistently.
Exactly.
So you're right. I mean, from a fit standpoint, he is one of the better signings. And again, like we mentioned, Milwaukee being so bad on 3, he's a decent shooter.
Yeah, I mean, better than anything the Bucks have.
Yeah, he's gonna have to be. He's a spot up guy. He's not, that Steph Curry come off a pick and shoot. But if he's open, feet against the line, he's gonna make them.
He's a semi-reliable three-point shooter.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you saw it in the finals 2 years ago, and just wasn't really a spot for him once Kyrie came back in this season, especially in the finals. But yeah, can definitely be a solid role player on a good team.
Who is your number one?
My number one is actually a combination because after I made the list, they added the second guy. But
you're a fucking cheater.
Fair. All right. It is the combination of Zaza Pachulia and David West signing with the Warriors for a combined $4.5 million.
David West is chasing that ring.
Sure is. I mean, yeah, obviously like we said at the top, no move was bigger than Durant going to Golden State. But with Durant going there, they had to get rid of Harrison Barnes. They had to let Andrew Bogut go. They had to let Festus Ezeli leave. And Mo Spates left too. Or is Ezeli still on the team?
No, Ezeli left too. I think he went to the Blazers.
Yeah, okay. And then Mo Spates left too. So they lost all of their big men. Now, granted, they weren't great. And
No.
Festus
No
Ezeli, I've made the argument, cost the Warriors Game 7 in the finals. But
I would agree with you.
But you talk about getting guys that can fit your system and give you a better option than what you had. Zaza Pachulia has really made this career renaissance since he was with the Bucks and Dallas last year. Just a very solid number 5, can rebound, scores okay. You know, he's kind of that same style of Bogut, where if he's near the basket, he can score, but he's not always looking to score. But I think he's going to be a better rotational defender than Andrew Bogut was, just because his lateral movement wasn't at the same level as Pachulia. And then David West, when they have their bench unit in, he's going to be that guy that kind of fill that most Spates role. Obviously not shooting threes like Spates kind of like to, but can still score in the post and can still play solid defense for short stretches, even though he's a little bit undersized.
West is probably a better mid-range shooter than Spates is.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with you there. And with Durant's contract, the Warriors lost the depth that made them even better than their starting lineup, and having these two guys is going to be huge.
Yeah, they're going to have to rely on their second team even more than they did before, and their second team got a lot worse.
True. And the only thing that I can say to that, I mean, the Warriors are never going to have a possession, or at least they shouldn't until they're blowing somebody out, that either Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, or Kevin Durant aren't going to be on the floor.
Oh, yeah.
I mean,
there's no way that they can have all 3 of them on the bench at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, if that happens and it's not blowout, Steve Kerr should be fired. But they're going to be they're never going to have a stretch where they don't have a top 10 creator of shots in the NBA.
Yeah. You hit the nail on the head. Steve Kerr starts doing that, he should be fired.
But there is the list right there. I mean, some under-the-radar signings, some names you probably know, but maybe you just kind of forgot about and lost in the shuffle of all the big signings that happened. But let us know in our comments if you got a list or got a guy of your own that maybe we missed, or somebody on your team that you're really excited about that was a free agent signing.
We're good at lists.
We are. We're getting better. And we got an exciting one that's kind of a list for the next podcast. But we're going to do our WWE mock draft.
Yes.
We're bringing
I've
on.
been wanting to do this for a while.
Yes, we have. We've been teasing it. We're ready to do this. We're gonna lay out the ground rules tonight and get everybody on the same page. And we're gonna bring on my boy Matt Shefke, huge wrestling fan. We've been wrestling fans since we ever known each other, since back in like 3rd grade. So really excited to hear what you guys go back and forth on some of your picks. So listen for that one.
So much better than him. I can already tell.
All right, I'm ready to. I'll be the moderator, and Logan and Matt will be picking for one of the sides, which I've determined will be set up by a coin flip. So.
Oh, damn.
Yeah.
I was gonna call dibs on one of them right now.
We'll see.
No, it's our podcast.
I was gonna say you are the co-host. I guess you can do what you want.
I get Raw.
All right, you get Raw. I think he wanted SmackDown anyway, so they might work
how
out.
about that?
All right.
We're already on a roll.
True. That is the podcast. Wang, tell the people where they can find us.
We're on Facebook, Fat Guys and Friends. You can email us, fatguysandfriends@gmail.com, or tweet us on the Twitter machine, fatguys, capital N as in Nancy, friends.
Perfect.
Oh, and we're also on iTunes now because I'm cool.
Yes.
Figuring out stuff.
Fantastic. Listen to us. Download the podcast. Listen to it. Leave comments.
Yeah.
Let us know.
Show it to your grandma. Play it in your car. Do anything.
Do it all. Good shit, Wang. Good talk, buddy.
I like it a lot. Goodbye, people.
Goodbye.